Hello. So this is the first time I've really done a live stream like this, and I just wanted to try something different. So as often happens with the new year, you kind of have a chance to reflect on things that have happened and kind of think about what you might want to do differently in the future. And one thing I was thinking that I might want to do differently is kind of how I can utilize this YouTube channel. So up until now, pretty much what I've done with the YouTube channel is to post my pretty much the audio version of the podcast, which I realize that YouTube is predominantly video, although with YouTube Premium, YouTube Music, the idea that Google Play Music may be going away potentially, switching to YouTube Music, and really Google is obviously focusing on turning YouTube into an entertainment hub for not only video but audio as well. So that's one of the primary reasons I was posting it over there, since I already had the audio content created, just posting that and allowing people that prefer to listen to audio that way to do that. However, there's one thing that I haven't really done, and that's this live portion. And I thought I would try to do that more, maybe even just focus only on doing live or kind of behind the scenes for Based on a True Story using the YouTube live platform, and then allowing you to subscribe to the audio podcast through whatever podcast app you prefer. So I don't know, this is going to be laid back. This is the first time I'm doing this, so I'm kind of testing this setup that I have here, so you may see things change. Again, this is the first time doing this, so I wanted to set some expectations. I recognize most people aren't going to be watching this live, which is perfectly fine, because I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to organize things to be able to see a chat room at the same time. I have my computer over here. So rather than, switching back and forth all the time, I'm going to have to figure some of that out, or I might just have to switch back and forth for now. All right. So with that in mind, I thought this would be this first video would be a great time to share something about the scheduling for Based on a True Story. And really that's going to play heavily into the scheduling for these live streams, because I would like these live streams to be a lot more laid back, a lot more behind the scenes. If you have questions about how the show is produced, if you've thought about creating your own podcast, you want to know what it takes to create one, or if you have questions about Based on a True Story, we can talk about the technology. You see the microphone that I use to record the podcast in front of me, what the tools are that I use to organize all of it or to create the actual show. And I'm happy to open up and share a lot of that. So if you have questions, by all means, let me know. But the first thing really comes to scheduling. So scheduling on a podcast is very, very important. It's important, of course, to kind of stay consistent as much as you can. And that really means a lot of time management and productivity. I'm a huge into productivity. I'm a productivity geek. I love anything to do with productivity. And so on the audio podcast, I'm releasing every other week. Now, I'd like to do these live streams maybe every week. I'm going to try to shoot for every week. The catch there, and this is why I think this is a good discussion to have up front, is I don't know if I can commit to having it be the same time every week. So right now I'm doing this live on a Saturday afternoon, but I already know that I'm not going to be able to do it on a Saturday afternoon next week because I have a scheduling conflict. And that really goes to the heart of Based on a True Story as a podcast, because you may or may not know this, but Based on a True Story is not my first podcast. I had a podcast before with a good friend of mine named Brian, who was my co-host. And together, we worked for a company that did training for the video or the VFX and games industries. So companies like Pixar and Activision and EA and all these, huge companies behind the blockbuster movies and games. And we provided training for them. And I was the head of the content marketing team. And as part of that, we created a podcast to take advantage of some of the contacts that we had and share some of the behind the scenes for how they create the movies and the games that they do. And so I had the chance to interview on that podcast. It was called Pixel Hub. There's still archives out there if you want to find them. If you want to know, I got a link. I can share that if you would like to hear some of those episodes. That was my first podcast, so keep that in mind. But so I had a chance to talk to people like Jace Hansen. You may not know who Jace Hansen is, but if you've seen Iron Man in the Avengers, you know that when he puts on the helmet and he's got the UI, Jace Hansen is the guy who designed that UI inside of his helmet. Other people like Robin Haddow, she did the same sort of thing with the fictional UI, but she did that for TV shows like The Flash and Arrow. She's actually, I believe she also did all the fictional UIs for Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as well, more recently. But then we talked to people like Grant Wilson. If you've watched Ghost Hunters, you know who Grant Wilson is. But after Ghost Hunters, he became a board game designer. And so we talked to him about that and what was it like kind of making board games and doing it that way. Then we talked to people like Jorge Gutierrez, who is the director of The Book of Life, and his story and how that was heavily influencing the story in The Book of Life itself. As well as people like, Patrick Lynn, the director of photography at Pixar. He working on Inside Out and movies like that. And just a ton of really, really big names that you may not know who they are, but you know their work. And it was fun to get to chat with them. So that was my first foray into podcasting. And as you can imagine, a lot of these people are really, really busy. And so it's really hard to catch them. And really the only way that we were able to was to submit to their schedule. Let us know when it'll work for you and we'll figure it out on our end. And that was a lot easier to do with Brian because we were doing it as a part of the company that we worked for. And so it was part of our job. And so we were able to say, pretty much any time during business hours, we're able to do it. If you need us to come in after business hours, we did that. We actually talked to Stan Alley, who was a VFX supervisor on What We Do in the Shadows. Amazing movie. But we got to talk to him about, how he did all that. He actually is in New Zealand in Weta. So had also worked on a lot of the movies that Weta works on, like Lord of the Rings and King Kong. But so I'm in the United States. And so him being in New Zealand, Brian and I came in well after hours in order to accommodate his schedule, which is perfectly fine. But that kind of leads into this whole discussion about scheduling, because scheduling is difficult when you're trying to interview people. It's even more difficult when you have multiple people on the hosting side. And so what happened with that first podcast was there was a massive layoff. Everybody was laid off, including Brian and myself. And so the podcast was no more. And so it became not only if we wanted to continue it, which we both did, both of us wanted to continue that. We had a lot of fun with it. But it meant not only scheduling the podcast or the interviewee, so not only scheduling who our guest was going to be, but also scheduling between ourselves and our finding new jobs and working around that. So it was really difficult, and we tried to figure it out. In the meantime, what I wanted to continue podcasting, and so I decided to try to figure out something that I could do on my own without relying on scheduling guests. And so that's kind of where I came up with the idea for Based on a True Story. I've told that origin story before, so if you've seen me interviewed on or heard me interviewed on other podcasts, you've probably heard that. But if you want to hear that, I can have that for a future live stream perhaps. But the point there is that one of the key cornerstones to Based on a True Story is that it's something that I can do on my own schedule, and I can do it on nights and weekends outside of family obligations, outside of my full-time job, outside of all of that. That's where I'm able to work on Based on a True Story. So one evening it might be half an hour writing, another evening it might be an hour of research, I might be able to pull together 4 or 5 hours on a weekend to crank out some recording. It's really sporadic when those times are. Sometimes it's early in the morning, sometimes it's in the evening. Sometimes I'll wake up before work and crank out some, get 500 words or 1,000 words written before I can actually go into work. So the scheduling part of that, being a single host podcast, a benefit to that is that I'm able to really do it on my own schedule. Now, that flows right into this live stream, because I don't know if I can do that on a reliable schedule. So I'd like to do it every week. I don't know if it'll be the same time every week. Maybe once we kind of get going, I can kind of start to figure out what it'll look like and how I can maybe figure out a day of the week or sometime on a weekend or something to be able to get a little more consistent. But for now, I think it'll just be fun to go behind the scenes and kind of share some of the things that I'm doing behind the scenes, give updates on the podcast, because even though the audio podcast comes out every other week, I'm working on it every single day. Every single day I work on the show. So I can kind of share some updates on that and what's going on, or kind of fill you in on behind the scenes, what it's like behind the mic to create a podcast. That way, if you're curious about creating a podcast, or maybe you already have a podcast, you want to see how somebody else handles the workflow and how somebody else does it all, maybe you can pull some tips and tricks, and hopefully it'll kind of help you out there. So that's about it for today. Short and sweet. I don't expect these live streams to be anything major. I just want to sit down behind the camera and hopefully share some helpful information. So if you like this, by all means, let me know. If you don't like this, if you'd prefer for me to just keep posting the audio podcast to YouTube, let me know. I can do that as well. But I thought that would doing these live streams on YouTube would take advantage of YouTube's capabilities and do something that I can't do with just the audio podcast. You can, no matter what, you can go listen to the audio podcast. That'll still be there. You can listen to that on any podcast app. Just find Based on a True Story, or go to basedonatruestorypodcast.com/subscribe. And I've got links to all the different places you can subscribe. So, but yeah, hopefully be able to take advantage of YouTube a little bit more and have some fun with this. So that's all for now. And thanks for watching.